Since 1989, since the fall of the Berlin Wall, that's when the movement started in Latin America, when they started understanding why is the rest of the world caught in this crossfire between the Soviet bloc and the capitalist bloc? Don't we have an independent existence of our own? So that's when the question starts. Somehow, that scholarship never comes to Bharat at all. All sorts of woke garbage comes to Bharat. The experience prior to European colonization also is significantly in the form of settler colonization. So there are 4 or 5 different categories of colonization that I've explained in the book, based on literature, of course. It's not my original contribution. So assume for a moment that one particular group chooses to use the other group or another territory primarily as a resource for assets, or as a territory for minerals or human resources or whatever it may be. Then it is plain and simple exploitative colonization. But settler colonization is when there is sufficient incentive for the colonizing group to settle in the colonized territory in significant numbers and take over not just its administration. One of the litmus tests to understand whether a particular colonization translates to settler colonization is, if you decide to set up education systems, then it's a tertiary level of investment in the colonized society, wherein you choose to recast the colonized society in the mold of the colonizing society using education as the process. Which is to say, I don't limit myself to physical or political colonization, but I want you to think like me. I want you to dress like me. I want you to speak like me. And I want you to think in the very same language as me. Which unfortunately Indians take a lot of pride in when they say that today I think in English, right? So that means that project has been accomplished, mission accomplished. And then to the extent that you go to the next step, that not only do you start thinking like me, you also try and sever all relations with your ancestors, your pitris and your past. That is such a serious consequence for a philosophy that is based on a lot of pitri worship, on ancestor worship. So therefore you're expected to spit on your past, think like the colonizer. That is the level of investment of a settler colonizer, which is exactly what happened with Bharat. Now, there is a reason why I would specifically apply this to all the Delhi sultanates followed by the Mughal, let's say, dynasty. Because prior to that, what happened? 7th century or rather 8th century, Muhammad bin Qasim comes, loots and goes away. So he is at best a looter, a plunderer and an invader of the, not even of the Alexandrian variety. Because he is not trying to establish a kingdom here. His intent is to loot, plunder, take the resources and go back. Now after the invasion of Sindh, it takes about 3 centuries for the Arabs and let's say the now fallen Afghanis who've now become from the Shahi Hindus, they've now become Muslims, for them to start crossing to this side. Which is why 10th, 11th century with Muhammad Ghori becomes the most important, let's say, timeline, so to speak. The Battle of Taraim becomes the most important landmark. Because that effectively starts the establishment of a dynasty. Starts with the Mamluks, the Khiljis, so on and so forth. And then finally, of course, the Mughal dynasty. So the establishment of a sultanate with, let's say, your administration, your epicenters here, your capital here and all of that is a significant departure from the Arab looting. That's very, very different, right? So that effectively takes the form and shape and color and texture of settler colonization. So therefore, although in principle, if I were to apply the logic of Latin America, I should be saying that around 10th century is what I would treat as the benchmark for Bharat, to start understanding how we were before that. Each of our philosophical darshanas, each of the Shat darshanas have their own implications on how we have taken it forward in the form of science and technology. And therefore, it may be impossible to even make sense of Indian scientific contributions as long as the Western paradigm is applied to it. Now the mistake that you're going to make as part of this discussion is to say, science is mein Western kya hai, Indian kya hai? No, not at all. Completely wrong. The manner in which you have a particular philosophy is the reason why you arrive at the concept of Shunya. The way you understand your relationship with the Supreme Consciousness, your place in the entire cosmos, is the reason that you decide to come with a particular concept called Shunya. It has got everything to do with your way of life. It's got everything to do with the philosophy that you believe in. It's got everything to do with how you see the Supreme Consciousness. So when someone says science is science, there are two, let's say, problems with it. One, it completely ignores the anthropological, evolutionary and cultural aspects of science. Completely. And the second thing that it does is that it treats one particular template as universal. And therefore it submerges everything else under the carpet. Finished. That's the end of the matter. So that means you will never look at Ayurveda on its own terms. Ayurveda will have to prove itself on the anvils of allopathic empirical evidence. So therefore, clinical trial studies, so on and so forth, the way you look at how a molecule is developed in traditional, let's say in Western pharmaceutical science, is the model that you choose to superimpose on Ayurveda without asking whether this is right. Is this fair? Because you have told yourself, if it's a quality standard, this is the benchmark. If it's an empirical standard, this is the benchmark. If there is rigor, this is the benchmark. There ends the discussion after that. So perhaps when you look at all these workshops which are happening under the umbrella of IKS, the first thing is not the content or the substance, but the manner of seeing, the manner of approaching, the mode of learning. That is the radical change that is required. Which is to say, it's a complete rewiring. And you can't rewire unless you unlearn.